Good morning, George.
Hey, good morning, Ethan. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Everyone, welcome to Coffee with George and Phil. On the first and third Saturdays of each month, we show up to help you get from where you are to where you want to be, either personally or professionally. Whether you're in job transition, you're making a career pivot, or you're a leader trying to ignite, engage, and retain your team, we are your hosts, George Murray and Ethan Connor. I'm filling in for Phil during his absence. We're glad you could meet us early this Saturday morning. We do encourage questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as time allows us.
We want to thank our viewers joining us. If you're watching this live on YouTube or LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live, we're streaming and on several podcasts. So if you're watching this on actually pre-recorded on either YouTube or one of the podcast platforms, just hit the subscribe button to be notified for the next upcoming shows.
Today, onboarding a new hire averages about $1,500 per new hire. And with a strong onboarding process, it increases new hire retention by 82% and improves productivity by 70%. However, 88% of employees believe that their company doesn't do a great job when it comes to onboarding. But before we get started with that, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Global HR Research. They are better by every measure, as highlighted by their three pillars: better data, better technology, and better teams. They're 100% US based, plus they have a team that is committed to customer excellence.
And specifically for this show today, talking about a robust onboarding, and we'll get into when robust onboarding starts. It actually starts before the individual. Global HR Research can help you through that whole process.
So George, you've got quite a few things going on. You're teaching a class, cut your career search time in half at Minneapolis Technical College. You've got a new book out, and you got a new podcast. How do you do all this?
I think probably good time management and a little bit shorter on the sleep hours. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've been teaching the the hired for my first book to help people in career transition for about 2 years now. And definitely, me personally being out there as a practitioner, actually knowing, living it and doing it, can get really related to the individuals that are going through those times, because those folks who've actually done the transition realize that you're more times down than you are up in the roller coaster ride of life and career transition. And then the book is really kind of culmination of more than 40 CFOs, CHROs, and CEOs of this whole, how do I, ignite my workforce, get them engaged, even if they're in the hybrid sense, and most importantly, in this economy, retaining my talent. So it's out, hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and it'll also soon be out on Audible. And then finally, second chair, as a chief operating officer myself, we're always going through some challenges each and every week. So I was able to start this podcast to really interview chief operating officers on two basic questions, and we deep dive on those questions. Just recently had Tom Pettit, who is the chief operating officer of Generac, and they've gone through some tremendous growth over the last couple of years. And then coming up, we'll have Chris West of Winnebago. So you're really excited.
All right. These are all very relevant demands of life right now. But switching gears to a robust onboarding, our topic for today, it's really all about putting your best company foot forward. And to talk about this more, we want to welcome to the show Tamara Tashi, Senior Vice President and Executive Coach and a licensed psychologist at CPI, Career Partners International, Twin Cities. So let's bring Tamara on. Welcome, Tamara, to the show.
Thank you, Ethan and George. It's good to see you, and thanks for inviting me to participate this morning.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on so early in the morning. Those people watching on LinkedIn Live. Tamara and I have actually known each other for almost 4 or 5 years, I think, between my first and career transition. So welcome to the show. Hey, why don't we just jump right into it, Tamara? Okay. One of the things that you are very well known at is really a robust onboarding process. Can you tell us what that kind of looks like, and when does that start?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing to understand is that onboarding is not the same thing as the classic HR orientation. That is typically a one-day event where a lot of paperwork is signed. Onboarding is a process that often lasts for 3 to 6 months, depending on the role and the organization. And there is planning and activities that take place even prior to the start date. If you are, as a leader, if you are preparing an onboarding program, there are some best practices. Um, Certainly sending out welcome emails and resource packets, new hire announcement, setting up technology, making sure that the individual is provisioned to start on the very first day, making a contribution to the organization. Assigning an onboarding partner, which could be somebody from HR or somebody from your team that would be a peer to the new hire. Creating that stakeholder map, all those different people that you would want this individual to meet, and facilitating those introductions, scheduling critical meetings, developing a learning plan is very important. I'll talk more about that as well. And also activities for the first few weeks and that critical first day. You're going to want to familiarize your new hire with the organization's culture, its history, its mission, its customer base, and how this particular individual's role is going to advance the mission of the organization. You'll have conversations about early wins, low-hanging fruit, as well as long-term goals for the position. And a very important thing is the constant checking in with the new individual. And we recommend that you meet with that person weekly for the first several months of onboarding. And then from there may move to more of a semi-monthly or bi-monthly cadence. Leaders are starting even earlier than professionals to prepare for their new roles. George Brett calls it the fuzzy front end. It's that time between accepting an offer and starting your first day. And there you're probably accessing and familiarizing yourself with a variety of information, critical information. You're probably already reaching out to some key stakeholders. You're creating your learning plan, key messages that you're going to deliver when you come on board, as well as potentially a 30, 60, 90-day action plan.
I'm sure being an executive coach of outplacement services and executive coaching, you have heard stories on what is not working well with companies and their onboarding. So do you care to just elaborate on those and what employers need to do to turn those concerns around?
Well, I can share a case study or two for sure. One that comes to mind, it was an SVP marketing with a large nonprofit. I got a call from the president. He said, I'm having trouble with my marketing executive. And I said, well, what's going on? And he said, well, she's managed to offend just about everyone on the senior leadership team. I said, well, how long has she been there? 24 months. Was she professionally onboarded? No. When did she know there was a problem? Well, we sat her down a few months ago to talk to her. So there was no feedback about how she was being perceived during that period of time. Not really. And now you'd like me to change the perceptions of all of the members of the senior leadership team at this stage in the game. Yes. Well, when I sat down and began coaching this individual, I learned that the first 6 months of her onboarding period was very stressful. She was a repatriate. She came back from Norway. Her kids were behind in school. They were crying every night. They needed tutors. Her husband had a major health issue, which changed things in their personal life. She was onboarding onto a nonprofit. She'd never worked for a nonprofit. She was a bit stumped as to how they confronted or dealt with conflict. It seemed very passive aggressive to her. And so there were all these things going on during that early time when she was onboarding. And it brought out her backup style, her default style, which was to be much more, I'm taking control. It sounds like my way or the highway. And it was ill received by the senior leadership team. So we had to do quite a bit to try and reposition her as a leader in the organization. Another case study, more recently, more of a professional level person. He was re-careering and he was moving into a new industry. And it was a remote role, although he was traveling to customer sites. And he was really left out there to sink or swim on his own. There was no learning plan. There were no cadence of meetings for him to check in. Apparently his boss came in one day and spent a couple hours with him, but other than that, there were no meetings scheduled. He contacted me and he said, I'm not going to make it here. It's just, I got to get out of here. This is driving me crazy. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm trying to teach myself all the systems here, and I'm not being very successful. So those are two situations. One where you need to provide feedback to individuals. Don't let them derail, and provide feedback early on so that they can redirect. And the other is structure the learning process.
Hey, Tamara, 17% of employees that are new in jobs between the first week and third month of new jobs, how much of this is they're leaving? And how much of this is related to poor onboarding? And again, I think back to your earlier comment, what are some of the simple things that they can do to turn over this metric starting Monday?
Yeah, I think that there might be some outliers. There might be some situations where people were conducting a robust job search and new developments surfaced and they decided to leave and move on to that other opportunity. There might even be situations, and I've heard this before, where HR or the hiring manager is really making the employee believe that the job or the culture is much different than what they experienced. But I would say in general, what you are talking about is true. The reason why people leave early is because of that onboarding process. And I've already outlined a few kind of simple things that can be done to make that experience more positive. But really the two major things here are making the individual feel welcome and that they belong in the organization and on the team. And then the second is structuring that learning process so that you're reducing the sense of being overwhelmed while at the same time increasing the ability to contribute, to have them contribute sooner. So it's a real balancing act there.
1 in 4 employers reported that their onboarding process takes a day or less, while 21% reported the process taking over the course of a month. So what are some important factors to consider when developing or evaluating a robust onboarding process?
Again, I think one of the key components here is that the hiring manager needs to know that they're accountable. They're accountable for the effective onboarding of their employee. It's not HR's responsibility, it's theirs. And so making sure that they're committed to effective onboarding is key. And then providing them the training that they need to be able to do that. And then some simple tools like checklists can really help. An onboarding checklist can help to drive efficiency, but also in consistency in onboarding new hires. Focusing on making the individual feel welcome. Create a welcome to the team event, or take people out to lunch, or have treats during the first team meeting together, or even bring in somebody to do some professional team building with the new team. All of these things are important for making that individual feel welcome. That is particularly true, I think, in hybrid situations, where people are not in the office, or remote situations. They're already kind of feeling isolated out there to some extent. How do you create that welcoming experience, that belonging experience? I think that assigning and leveraging an onboarding partner is a brilliant tactic, as long as you communicate expectations for the partner as to what you're hoping that they will do in collaboration with the new hire. The learning process needs to be structured. So what we do when we bring on a new leader or a new person at CPI is we'll sit down and we will outline what are the key areas of learning that need to take place. And then we'll assign a subject matter expert or a specific resource to work with that new hire one-on-one around that learning component. And then as I mentioned earlier, the constant checking in is key. And those are really requirements to having a successful onboarding experience.
Hey, for their viewers that are listening to LinkedIn, I understand that there's a vicious loop that's going on. So if you want to wait till 8:30, you can actually see this recorded show on YouTube. It's actually will be posted. So I'm not experiencing any technology failures here. So it must be some intermittent issues that are going on with LinkedIn. Moving forward, early we talked about cost of onboarding. What are some of the cost savings you see when companies prioritize employees' training in the first few months?
Well, as I mentioned, George, I provide onboarding coaching at the executive level. And depending on who you read, the research indicates that anywhere between 40% and 62% of leaders will fail in the first 18 months on the job. I mean, that's just an astounding statistic. At the high end, those are people coming in from out of industry. And at the low end, those are individuals that are being promoted to positions of greater responsibility internally. Okay, so there are best practices associated with that movement, that onboarding experience as well.
And whose responsibility for, just interject real quick,
Sure.
Whose responsibility is that failure?
Yeah. We'd like to attribute the success of onboarding to whoever the hiring manager is. So if that's a CEO or if that's a COO or all the way down, they own the onboarding process. The hiring manager owns the onboarding process. But if we talk about this scenario here, we can see that there's a significant expense that goes on when we hire in a leader and they don't stick past 18 months. And the research indicates that it's upward to 3 times their first year annual salary. So that's significant, particularly if there has been a search practitioner involved. So, there are other costs that are harder to measure. Things like loss of credibility of the organization. A lot of false starts, because most leaders come in with new intention and a new strategy, and they build their own platform out, and they look at their team and they align their team and they begin to drive those initiatives, and then it all ends because they leave and a new person comes in and starts the whole process all over again. So those are costs that are harder to measure, but they are also significant.
Well, Tamara, these things go by really quickly, so we're reaching the end of our time here. But I want to ask one more question. Do you have any examples of strong onboarding processes that you've seen, good practices that have prevented employees from leaving early that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I can share a case study with you. I was working with a VP of marketing in a higher ed organization. And shortly after starting, and I had been brought in to onboard her professionally. And shortly after starting, we realized that the CEO, very visionary man, was just not interested in short-term or 3-year strategy or day-to-day operations and metrics and results. Was just very out there and was absent most of the time as a result of that from the team. It was a hard time for the senior leadership team in general, many of which were newer. And it was certainly a difficult time for this VP of marketing. And I know that she would likely have left if there hadn't been an onboarding coach, because she spoke to it. So a lot of it is around providing direction for that new hire, and making sure that they are, the word assimilation is kind of weird, but assimilating into the culture, and that there is structure to the process. It's a purposeful process. And a lot of people don't take the time to think through how they want to onboard a leader or anyone else on their team.
Well, Tama, we really appreciate you showing up this morning. Is there any parting thoughts that we hadn't covered that you want to kind of identify and share with the viewers?
Yeah, so this is an excellent resource. I don't know if you've read George Brat's book. It is the New Leaders 100-Day Action Plan. I would highly recommend it. A lot of people have read like the first 90 days, which is another good resource. But this one in particular, I've enjoyed working with as I've done the onboarding of different leaders.
Oh, I appreciate that.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the discussion.
Right. Well, we first want to thank Tamara for showing up and helping us. I mean, onboarding is critical for any business, and you can turn around and reach out to Tamara. And I highly suggest, if you're an executive in transition and you're looking to jump into your new role, Tamara can help you. And if you're an organization that needs help in your onboarding process, you can also reach out to Tamara. Even though it says career partners in Twin Cities, it's international.
Well, our next show is going to be on October 15th. We're going to talk about mental health in the workplace and what the post-COVID workplace is teaching us coming out of this pandemic and the way that the workplace dynamics have changed, particularly when it comes to mental health, as it has affected so many people. Till then, we want to wish our viewers a great weekend and week ahead, and remember to achieve forward
And get better.